Oh, good morning.
Hey there.
This is not the usual music, and I'm letting it play underneath us for a few seconds.
It's still nice.
It is still nice. Good morning, Anru.
Good morning, Babs.
So Anru is back, and we're going to continue our conversation, our spiritual conversations around the Orisha. The Orisha. Hello, my love.
Hey there.
Nice to see you.
You too.
I'm telling you,
Happy fall.
I'm becoming well known because of you. People are like, "Oh, you're on with Anru." What are y'all going to talk about next?
I don't think there's a shortage of you being well known.
No. People love you. I was like,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm just happy to be along for the ride. How are you? Happy
I'm good.
fall.
I'm good. Yes.
Last time I saw you was summer. Now we are
Right?
squarely in fall.
I know. We had a little burst of summer again.
Yeah, like a day.
80 something, right?
2
Now
days
we're
of
back in
it.
the fall.
Now we're back. Now it's 50 degrees. Yeah.
I do love the fall though too.
I do too. The crispness
Right.
in the air, and the leaves are changing. You know, so you have to love New England for that. So
or hate. I mean, there are people who hate New England for that.
Oh.
I'm not one of them.
No, I'm not one of them either.
I love the little layering on.
Yeah, see, I'm layered up.
Yeah,
Yes.
Me too.
I'm layered up, and yeah, I feel everything about that. So what are we talking about today, Mr. Anru Hapkinney?
So I thought I'd at least start off talking about like elders and lineage and just kind of communities in that way. Because it's something, and what comes with it is also like apprenticeship. And it's something that in traditional communities and even in some trades in the United States and in Europe, that's still recognized and honored as a form of learning. Like there's learning, not just I got the information, but there's learning in the relationship between a student and pupil, which is can sometimes exist in our kind of regular academics, but typically doesn't, in terms of what the relationship, how knowledge is passed on, how the day-to-day things are passed on, how people's character is passed on, as well as kind of the teachings. And part of the thing the reason I want to comment on this or share this is not just kind of the idea of it, but also really honoring kind of my first teachers in Orisha, Shango Yemi, Ogundaro Shundiwura, Barbara Eaton, and Liz Coleman, Oshun Kemi, and Uhinu Tete. And so those were the two people who had the spiritual house in Boston, the Orisha house in Boston, that I joined, really by the beginnings of learning about Orisha, and then really apprenticed with them in a kind of in as formal a way as you can. And so kind of at the peak of that, I would show up at their home like on a Friday night, and I would leave sometimes Sunday afternoon or some Sunday evening. And their spiritual house was both kind of a place of worship, like there were gatherings there where people did celebrations, but it was also a place that spiritual work happened, that community work happened, that creative work happened. And so it was really this kind of also like a cultural center around Orisha practice, and the blending and the intention of elevating the knowledge and education of people interested in Orisha, even beyond what is kind of typically done in the diaspora. And so typically in the diaspora, because these are institutions that have survived the period of slavery and enslavement, they really went underground and were hidden, kind of less really not seen unless you knew where to go. And so then knowledge also was held in the same way, right? So this preciousness of knowledge, of ritual, of ceremony, of song, of connection and liturgy, of sacred literature, really being passed on generation by generation, teacher to student, Olorisha or Iyalorisha, kind of elders, godmothers, godfathers of the house to their godchildren, and has existed and continues to exist today. And some of them are still very much kind of underground, right? They're not seen in any official capacity, and because there's changes in how cities and communities see Orisha practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have kind of formed like temples or become kind of have churches, so to speak, because that's the language that's used to kind of formally institutionalize these religious practices. And many of them are not formalized. They're still really informal in that way. Like, you know who the teacher is or the elder, and you go there and you learn and you practice and you're taught. And you know, I think certainly part of this is due to age. You know, I'm 51 now, and I also used to be a carpenter and was really trained much more in this kind of apprenticeship model, where I worked with the same person for many, many years and really learned not just the skills, but the approach to the work, and the approach to people surrounding the work. And so some of this is really just an acknowledgement of really those first teachers of mine, in a different way. So very often I kind of talk about, like, here's this kind of learning I did, and then, you know, we had a falling out. There was some real difficulties in that relationship, which led me to leave that spiritual house and kind of leave them as my main teachers. And then there was a Nigerian elder, Babalawo Ogunwande Abimbola, who was kind of renowned internationally as both a scholar and a linguist, but also as a traditionalist, and has some his role in the religion is as the spokesperson to Ifa for the world. So he's met with, you know, very high level people kind of all over, both in religion and spirituality and politics, and travels and teaches still. He's in or close to his 90s now.
Wow.
And so, you know, my teaching continued even after I left that house. But sometimes it's easier for me to talk about the difficulties and the challenges of having elders who've also grown up in a variety of ways and been hurt in a variety of ways, and so exercise power in certain ways, particularly in a tradition where eldership, which is not valued explicitly in this culture, and traditional systems of thought are not valued explicitly in this culture, and healing and kind of some of the kind of healing from trauma is also not dealt with explicitly in this culture. And also, if you look at Black and African diaspora communities, right, kind of mental health stuff isn't really looked at. You know, if it's, you know, corporal punishment or that kind of power over is used not just in Black communities, but in all kinds of communities, but as a form of guidance, right? And also ways that those values, how they're seen even in Africa, can be said, oh, well, this is the elder, you just have to do what they say because this is your senior, and you don't know and they know, so you just have to say yes to it. And sometimes that can be positive and really powerful, because like they know things and I don't know things, and so that surrender to their teachings and the teachings can be really important. And when people are not healthy or expressing their teachings in a good way, that can be, you know, hurtful, that can be abusive in all kinds of ways. And not just in terms of my experience with them, but I've come across so many people in this tradition where there have been abuses of power. And this happens in every spiritual and religious community. There are abuses of power. We see that all the time. We see that with the Catholic Church is dealing with. We see things much more explicitly with more publicity because of things that have happened in the Me Too movement. But like, no, this has happened in terms of sexual abuse or sexual violence has more kind of airplay now. But the things around like spiritual abuses of power is something that also exists. And so typically my sharing of my experience with them is this like wonderful learning, and then like there was some what I experienced as kind of abuses of power, and I was like, I can't be in this house anymore, and kind of leaving and then continuing my studies. And so what I wanted to kind of come back to today was actually really honoring the richness and the difficulty and the challenge of holding these traditions in a system that kind of is assaulting that every day. And particularly with them, Shango Yemi and Oshun Kemi, as a, you know, interracial queer couple priestesses in a diasporic African religion that is already demonized, and then also learning a more Africanized version of that, right? So that puts them in like a smaller category of practitioners. And so just really honoring the work and the commitment and the sacrifices that were really needed, and that they did kind of day to day, because like this is how they were trained, and this is what they valued, and this is what they were trying to share with people. So I just wanted to kind of start off of really honoring them in particular, but also what it means to play that kind of role, be that kind of teacher, in traditions that are like hidden and underground for the most part.
Wow. That's a lot.
A lot on there, but I want to.
Okay, where do you want to start?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's. I think that there's the piece around the value of like apprenticeship.
I like that, and I like the piece about the reverence for elderly or those that have been here longer.
Yeah.
Because I think we don't value. I think Western culture, youth is powerful.
Yeah.
And
aging. A certain pocket of youth is idealized.
Yeah.
Because the very young are not. Right? The very young are like, well, you just do what we say.
Yeah.
Then there's a pocket of youth which is like, that's the golden age. How do we stay there?
And it's for everything, for sexuality, for achievement, for the way you look, for and then beyond that it becomes problematic,
right?
Not
valued as much.
And
how are you contributing,
and how can you, and then there's all these things that to drive you to be younger looking, which I think is an insult to the aging process.
Well, it becomes, I was just talking with someone this morning around the ways that our system encourages people not feeling enough, not worthy, not good enough.
Because I don't want to look
this other
20.
thing. You need this other thing to have worth and value.
Yeah.
And that actually pulls us away from nature and the land and just being a person.
Yeah.
And like what are normal things around the complexity and the diversity of age and what aging is and what life is. And instead of honoring that, saying, oh no, we want to stop the process, we want to control the process, we're going to value these people and not those people, and only these with certain ideas and certain characteristics. If you start to not have those, or they start to change, you're not valued, desirable, you're not as worthy. And so it's also not to say that, so there is power and wisdom in experience, right? In having experiences of life, and people also live for a long time and have experiences and have a certain kind of wisdom that's like not very helpful, is dysfunctional, is harmful, right? That is also true. And I think that's a place of tension, particularly in these, kind of apprenticeship, here's my teacher in this way. We're also kind of, I know for myself, I was really, I think, set up to be like, oh, so here's like a teacher, here's someone who has something of what I want, so I must just say yes to everything.
Okay.
And not be so discerning around like, how do I say yes to this and no to that, especially in a realm that like, it's new. I don't know. There's a lot of not knowing, right? And so struggling with being in a situation of not knowing, which is, for me, was challenging enough. And then to say like, oh, I can trust this part of myself, which is like, this is not okay anymore, right? Or this, I'm in a different place, right? This kind of growth that's happening, or I feel like I'm being seen or experienced in certain ways that doesn't jibe. And I think that the container of that, there wasn't enough capacity for us to then have a different kind of conversation, a different kind of growth. And I actually had to go to some other people to say like, well, how do I navigate how I respond to elders who, are doing things that I don't like, and how do I navigate that, right? So it's not just saying yes, all elders, right? It's like, how do I say like, I can set some limits and understandings that there's still a respect for people that has to be there. And so even as there's so much of a struggle to plant and nourish kind of new learning and this for me, this really new tradition and new way of thinking and being in the world, because I never came across any tradition like it. I'd read some things, but barely even that. I mean, this is long before the internet, and in terms of what I saw in terms of people's practicing, there was no living nature-based, African-based system accessible here. And so to find people where I could learn that and like, oh, how do I think differently? How do I have a different relationship to myself, to my ancestors, to these sacred forces, to other people, these communities, with language that's different, right? And some is in other languages, and like people are celebrating in ways I've sort of seen, but not really. And, real openness and learning to that. So there's a lot of, wow, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how it is. And the other piece for me is I really desired a tradition. I didn't want, because I knew myself enough that I could cobble things together.
Yeah.
Oh, I like this. I like that. This feels good. That feels good. I don't want to do that. I want to. And I also knew myself enough to say like, yeah, I will just, there's no guarantee that I won't come to a point and be like, I could just be making this up because this feels good. Right? It's a self-reinforcing, like, well, I like how this feels, and when I do it, I feel good.
But aren't all good thoughts, aren't all provoking thoughts based on a feeling of how people experience things, like L. Ron Hubbard, Moses. I mean,
how did we get to L. Ron Hubbard?
I mean, because he had a thought.
Yeah.
He had a thought, and he's like,
and
he created a whole sort
thing
of
with it.
thing, and people sort of latched onto it and said, "Hey, that resonates with me." Like that's the newest modern kind of movement I could think of that kind of touchy.
Right. So my experience of the divine, for me, felt like I was connecting to something greater than me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't generated by me. So I had an experience. I was like, ooh, there's something greater than me. And my experience of it is, so fundamentally in that place is like in nature and my experience with the divine. And so I was like, okay, I could just go and just be in that. But I wanted, like, I need a practice.
You need something.
I need a
I see.
How do I deepen that? How do I explore that? How do I say yes
ritual
to that?
Ritual mixed with,
I didn't even know what it was. Just saying, like, there's a spark. How do I nourish that? How do I nurture that? How do I make that alive in me? Because that had value and purpose to me. And I was like, well, if that's here, I want to nurture that because that gives this meaning. That gives like this life and this place and my relationship to it meaning.
And so that right there led you to where, because it could have, I mean, you could have said, oh, I think I should go find a church.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I should go find a mosque.
But those places didn't resonate. Those places didn't go, like, so give
there
was a little breath on the spark. There was
of elimination.
Right, a little breath on the spark and it glows, you get a little fire. Like, it didn't do that.
Okay. So process of elimination.
Yeah, it's like this. Nope. I mean, I feel something, but it's not this.
It's not this.
Not this.
Okay.
And so that was there's a whole process of like getting my feet on the ground. I was not grounded. I was having both an awakening experience during this time, but also crises. And so I had to like get my feet on the ground and get to be functional again. And then say, okay, well, now how do I explore this relationship, this experience? Because I didn't grow up feeling it in this way. I don't know. No one talked about it this way, in a way that like locked in together with what my experience was. And so that was the beginning of the exploring of like, okay, well, who in the world, right, experience the divine in this way? And so I said, oh, people having this experience with the divine, that's more like in these mystic traditions. So I explored, what are the mystic Christian traditions? What are these mystic traditions of Islam? Like, what are these mystical traditions? And it was like, okay, I can see and appreciate that like people have found their way in that, and it's not feeling like my way. And so then there was just reading and learning, and this like the early days of the kind of shamanic movement with Michael Harner and this foundation, and like there's something there, but it's not enough, but it's closer. And so it's almost like if you're outside and you smell something good and you really want it, you want to eat that, you have to follow it. Then you might make a wrong turn. You're like, I don't smell it anymore. Oh, no, it's back this way, right? So this finding, but it's the smell, right, that's connected to something inside, right? Because some people might smell it and say like, I don't like that, I want to avoid it, or they don't even smell it. And so for me, there was a connection, right, this outside and the inside, and it was kind of honing in on that. And it was listening to say like, well, where am I closer? Where am I further? And how does this feel? And how does that feel? And that kind of led me through reading and exploring and talking to people. And then it was like, all right, the reading and exploring and talking to people is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Like, it's someone tell me about the recipe. I'm like, oh yeah, but like
These
I
are
need
some
to
good
eat
points.
it, right? I need to eat it. I need to make it. I need to like have this in my
Mhm.
life. And that became the I need this practice. And then it
Mhm.
was, okay, I am not the first human being to feel this and to experience this and to desire
No,
this.
I think that's how
So there-
people come to wherever they come
Right.
to
So there
for
must
spiritual
be
stuff. Yes.
ways that people are
Mhm.
doing it or have done it. And so that became I need to find that. Because then it became, let me learn from those. And it was actually around, I mean, I hadn't thought of it in this way. So I went to college for a year, 86 for 1 year, 86, 87. I took a year off. And that's when I started to learn carpentry between kind of 87, 88. I went back to school, had these kind of experiences in college, 1990, 89 to like 91, graduated 92, kind of went back to doing carpentry. So I'd done carpentry this whole time. So I'd had this experience of not knowing
Mm-hmm.
and learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you can't, if you don't know how to like build a wall and you got to build a wall, you can't fake it. You got to say like, I don't know how to build it. Can you show me how to do this? And then I can do it, right? And I remember times where I would like stand in front of something like he wants me to do this thing, and like I can't fake it. Like I can't like, oh yeah, I know how to do that, because that was my tendency. Oh yeah, I can do that, and then I'd go figure it out. Like I can't actually figure this out. So can you show me? And it was like, yes, I'll show you. And then we would do it. Then I'd know how to do it. It's a process. So I think that I had enough of experience of that
Mm-hmm.
in really concrete ways that I could see this parallel of like, oh, so there must be ways that human beings have connected to the divine and had this experience through nature.
Okay.
And have had specific like
Yeah.
technologies to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became, let me find them. And that was its own exploration and questioning and searching.
Cool.
And then I found this woman who turns out to be a cousin, and then her partner, Oshun Kemi and Shango Yemi. And then that became this beginning of this learning and apprenticeship and relationship, which, I didn't kind of jump in. I was like, oh, a little bit and a little bit. And, oh, this is good and powerful. And there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
And that connection, the following of that, and the unfolding of that, and the ripening of that, and the connection and expression, both with community and then spiritually in my own development, was its own process.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, can you map those steps for people, or is this a unique process for everybody? Because it sounds like there are some concrete things that you could say, listen, stop, follow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, that's also the practice.
Okay.
So there's like what I find now is, so there are people who come to me kind of at various places on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see enough of kind of where I was in that moment to understand, oh, this is kind of the place. So I can kind of offer some things.
Mm-hmm.
I can say, well, okay, this is how I was trained. This is what was helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
These are these things. Try this, try that, right? And I have actually, so I have tools now, right? Here's how we understand our ancestors. This is how we understand how our relationship with them continues, even though physically they're not here. This is how we can do that. These are ways that people all over the world and the planet have done that. And these are the ways that I was taught how to do this, so I can pass those on. The teachings of that, it's like teaching someone to literally hammer a nail, right? What they build is what they build, but you can kind of offer and help them understand these are the tools, these are the ways that we connect and access, because different people connect with these things and are different, right? So some people, I used to think that the kind of pinnacle of spiritual connectedness in some way was, and even this experience with the divine was about literally seeing things and hearing things in the exact same way that I'm like looking at you across the room and like hearing myself talking in these headphones, and is different. But I know people who like see things that clearly and
Mm-hmm.
that like directly, and hear things that clearly and that directly. And I also know people where like there's no experience other than like kind of putting themselves in a place of receptivity, right? And those, I'm just choosing those as kind of ends of the spectrum, right? But there's no outside of what they might feel as like an outside confirmation of something, right? Here I'm praying. How am I hearing the response, right? How am I feeling the response? And some people, that hearing and feeling a response is like very direct and very obvious and overt. And some people, it's very, very subtle. And I used to think that like the more developed I am, the more overt in that way it is.
Okay.
And realizing pretty quick, well, elements of it pretty quick, but it was still something I had to really learn. That is not true. And like each of us is basically a different instrument in a certain way, right? We hear and see things and feel things and smell things differently. And it's actually about fine-tuning ourselves. Not, it's not to make a saxophone sound like a violin, right? It's really for this, that has a different sound, a different embodiment. And that's what's important. Like what needs to happen to kind of clear that out and be with it and be able to be ourselves or be that instrument.
Okay.
And so it's not, these are not kind of new things, but depending on where people are at, they're right, different tools. And like, well, sometimes you just got to clean it. That's your task, right? Polish it. And that's sticking a little bit. We got to clean that up, or you may need to replace this, right? There's the practical. And then there's the, what kind of music comes out? What are the notes? How do we make the notes clear? How do we play the music? How do we then dance with it? How do we improvise with it? So
yesterday I met your student, Roberto, and he was talking about how he's coming to this, and all the other things that he has studied and learned, like Zen and meditation and all these other kinds of things, and he just talked about adding this as like an extension or as a part of his larger spiritual experience. I was quite taken with that, because usually people are sheepish about exploring other models of spirituality and the divine,
right?
Because they feel like they're betraying whatever the ground foundational thing is. And he just seemed very at ease, like, I had a Zen teacher and 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 I know Anru meditates, and I was impressed by the meditation, and he holds this faith, and I'm following and learning, and I was very I liked that energy, that he was very open to the divine is wherever it is, and I want to follow it.
I mean, so I've been an Orisha practitioner since like 1992. Not a short amount of time. And I've also had a meditation practice for.
And they're not exclusive.
Well, they're not exclusive.
Do they feel exclusive?
They're different.
Okay.
There are elements that inform each other, but they're different technologies. It's like a different language, right? So it's people communicating. It's a different language. Sometimes things sound the same. Sometimes you're talking about the same thing and you can tell. And sometimes that seems completely different, and you're talking about something way over there, and there's a word for something that doesn't exist over here. So meditation, which comes out of Buddhism, actually meditation comes out of other traditions as well, but in terms of the practice that I've that has been helpful for me comes out of Buddhism, and it's kind of strategies which have enabled me to be with myself without thinking I have to do something about myself, right? And so that's like a concrete thing. There's other things that have been some benefits, but like, this experience of anger or sadness, I can be with that without running to like squash it or blow it up or throw it away or chop it up or hold it too tight. It's like, it's gonna come and it's gonna go, and my thoughts are gonna do that, and I don't have to believe everything I think. And it's been a space and a skill to cultivate those qualities, as well as elements of compassion, understanding for myself, compassion for others. So that's been there's been valuable teachings in that, but that hasn't been something for me that I've done formal training, had a formal teacher with, right? I haven't dived into that. And I have very close people, and actually his Zen teacher is a close friend of mine, who do that, right? That's their deep dive, right? My deep dive is in Orisha. That's the
Oh, I
the
see.
depth of that.
Okay. Okay.
And because of that deep dive in there, I feel like I'm able to appreciate and see other people who do their deep dives in whatever
Okay.
it is. And now there may be things that like, oh, there's a cultivation of us as people, because we're people, right? We're human beings. You know, it's like many paths up the mountain, so to speak. And so like I can see like, oh, who's up here, and I see you and I see them. That's not my path. That's not my language. That's not the technology I use, but I can see you there. Not everybody, right? Some people are like, no, it's my path. It's one mountain. You're going somewhere else, even though you think you are. Like that happens. I don't prescribe to that so much.
Mm-hmm.
My way, on one hand, is very much my way. The way I learn, understand, and connect with Orisha
Mm-hmm.
is kind of through me as an instrument. The way that meditation and the teachings of Buddhism and the Dharma lands on me and is held by me and forms me in a certain way.
Okay.
The ways that other traditional and indigenous practices and ceremonies inform me also contributes to me being a person who is also seeking this like wholeness and liberation with a capital L, and healing and expression and connection to the divine and connection to my ancestors. And so different things inform me and move me in that way. And sometimes it's very much in the Orisha tradition and practice in this way. And sometimes I've gone to the Orisha and like, is it best for me to do this other practice? And they say, yes, go do that. And I go do that. And then I come back and that's informed me. And that's deepened my life. And so Orisha practice for me has not exclusively been like everything is through this narrow framework about how I understand it, but is about my life in that way. What is my purpose and destiny in that way? And what I love actually about Orisha, even sacred literature, is that in the sacred literature, there are examples where someone comes to, a priest or priestess, I want to do this work. And they say, great, we're going to do this work. But for you, your purpose is in a different tradition. So it's one of the few traditions I know of that there's sacred literature says like, no, your practice should be somewhere else. We can do this work because it's valuable, and like your main practice should be somewhere else. And so that as a kind of flexible way of seeing like, yeah, this is about life and what this particular person needs for the fulfillment of their destiny and their purpose.
Wow.
And that might be a bit here and a bit here and a bit here. It might be a deep dive in one thing. It might be this, for me, it's been this kind of deep dive and, right, it's this and some of these other traditions and practices. Not to say I go deep here, and then I go deep somewhere else, and I go deep somewhere else. That just hasn't been it for me. But other people, that's been the thing, right? They're ordained here, and they've been initiated here, and then deep here, right? And they kind of have that. And I think there was a time where I thought, oh, that's like little hodgepodge, potluck, and not really seeing that there's also depth and there's also wholeness, and kind of we each really need something different, right? And what brings us in that, what brings us to that wholeness, and however we want to look at like whatever our purpose is, what brings us there to me is valuable while we're connected and respect the earth, each other, the vulnerabilities, the tendernesses of each other, the challenges, protect ourselves from things that are trying to really harm us, and really conduct ourselves in certain ways. Like those things are really valuable to me. And there are different systems that touch upon those things in different ways. And so for example, Roberto and other people, it's like, okay, well, you're coming to me for this thing, so let me help you with these tools here. And I have enough of other understandings that's not like, well, you better leave all that stuff behind and just do this one thing.
And so many other paths tell you that.
Yeah.
Which I find a little disheartening, only because I think all those other things lead you to this particular path. So I don't think you have to discard them necessarily, unless they don't serve you.
Well, that's the different question. It's what is really serving you. And sometimes, getting from point A to point B and then B to C, sometimes it's you want to hold on to the thing that got you from A to B.
Yeah.
Right. And bring that with you when you go to C. And other times you're like, well, this got me here. Right. The raft got me across the river. I don't need to carry the raft through the forest.
Up the hill. Yeah.
Right. But sometimes, right, okay, I do need to figure out a way to keep this, because I have to honor this is what brought me here,
Mhm.
and it's still relevant even as
Yeah.
I'm doing this other piece. So that's the complexity. And for me, there's less of the one right way. And the thing I do is I keep going to how I talked about divination last time. I think it was last time. And like there are ways that we communicate to get confirmation. And so many times, I'm feeling or inspired, or because of like my own experiences, I can share certain things. You may want to look at this instead, or why are you questioning this other thing? It seems like you already know your answer. What you don't need to actually ask, right, or be confused. Just trust that.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be coming from a place of intuition and not kind of a reactive instinct. And other times, I ask ancestors and the Orisha, and there are ways we do that. So it's not just I somehow, as Andrew Hafkini, has this well of all the answers and the all-knowing, but like this is how I get confirmation from these very forces who we are seeking guidance from. So I'm seeking guidance from these forces. Let me ask them, and let me see how I can honor what I'm then being asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a place that I think is really powerful, because I'm not the ultimate authority. I'm still looking at this relationship with these forces that like continually remind me how big they are and how big life is.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Wow. Ooh, boy, you must pack a punch in a class.
So one thing I really appreciate about these our talks, right, or ways that I can come and talk, I realize that's a lot of it, is I can also just be really free about what these connections are,
Mm-hmm.
right, and what's what informs, right, what are the layers, right, because it's not life is not easy. In some ways, it's not complicated, right?
Yeah.
If we can connect with it, right, live with it, but it is super complicated. There are these layers as human beings we're struggling with, and like where we're at, and what we're trying to do, and who did what, and now I'm hungry, and now I go to the bathroom, and this person's in the way, and now I'm in like, all the things, right? And it's not the same today as yesterday.
But right? Andrew, people who like go in the woods and be away from people, I think there's still layers to that.
Oh yeah,
right?
I used to think that was the answer.
I used to think that was the answer.
Let me
too.
go
like,
to the forest.
Yes, or let me go in solitude out, like Superman, right? Like, let's go to the quantum of solace, and all right. But even that has its complications.
We're still people.
Yeah.
Our mind comes with us. And I think that like there are so again, this thing around like purpose, for some people, that is the right way for them, right? And there are people who've done that, right? Isolation, some kind of hermitage, right? That they're going to. For me, I thought that was the case, and it's not. And some of that is not just because like what I like and don't like, but there is value, and there's something like in the difficulties and complexities with other people, right? There's things I really care about and I'm interested in. There are things that really annoy me about people, and there's ways that like I just want to be by myself. And a lot of that is because of how I get confused of like of how I'm supposed, like this idea of like I'm supposed to be a certain way. Like when I'm people like all the interpersonal and like how I'm being seen or how I'm being heard comes up, and the self-doubt comes up much more easily. But there's also richness and connectivity and something else that is also valuable in life.
Yeah.
About these interactions with other people.
Yeah.
And so that challenge is also part of what I need to wrestle with and be with, and how can I go to these places and be connected to things that fill me up to remind me of who I am, and learn enough so I can carry that with me, even in the complexities with other people.
Yeah.
And that has purpose and value and meaning to me as well. Not just like, well, I got mine, or now I have to just do what you want, but like, wow, there's the relationships, right? It's all these relationships which are part of life as well.
And all we're trying to do is manage them well. I feel like I'm trying to manage these relationships well.
Yeah.
But not like a ring, not like a ring, like a 3-ring circus, not like that. Or maybe it is.
Sometimes it's a 3-ring circus.
Oh, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is. So
this might be a good point. I want to And also, since we've been talking about these other traditions, I wanted to share something. I was talking with someone earlier today about this. And so there's a Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh, yes.
Who,
I do his walking
yeah,
meditation.
super brilliant, and lived during the Vietnam War and refused to take sides during it. So
Yeah.
really held these notions of compassion for people and peace and the end of suffering,
Yes.
right? And not just like, oh, you're the good guys, you're the bad guys. And so I'll read a poem that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
It's called "Call Me by My True Names," and it talks about not just the complexity of like our interrelationships, but that we actually all have inherent value. And sometimes, so this gets into a whole lot of other things, but I'm not going to deconstruct it right now, also because there's not time, which is good. We'll do that next time. But that it can be so easy to say those are the bad people, those are the people who are not woke, those are the people who are the others, and to challenge ourselves. For me, some of the words of this really struck me like, well, how can I also understand that? So, for example, Malcolm X is someone who is brilliant, who really held his teaching, and particularly towards the end of his life, as like really revolutionary in so many ways. Yet, for most people, so that he has a value to people, right? That he's seen as important and valuable, worthwhile to listen to some people emulate. Not that there weren't problems, but like there's that, right? Yet people would not have said the same thing when he was Malcolm Little, right?
Yeah.
Or when he was 12 or whatever. Right? They would say, well, then not so valuable, right? And I think that there's something in so what does it take for us to value people? Like where does that change? Right? At some point there was like, oh, now he's valuable, now he's not. And I think that is an important thing to really question in ourselves in the ways that we do that. And they'll be more clear. I'm gonna read this poem. So this poem was inspired when he read a story of there were some
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh, yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
There were pirates in Southeast Asia, and they kidnapped a young girl, and they raped her, and then she threw herself overboard.
Mm-hmm.
Tragic, heartbreaking. There's no question about it. He realized in himself how easy it is to then just say, well, those pirates, like, they should be killed, or they should be, some like massive punishment should happen to them. And then he began to think, well, they also grew up in certain circumstances that were outside of their control that led them to believe that was how they have value. That was how they should live their lives. And he said, like, so if I grew up there under those same things, I could very easily have been that pirate. And so what are the ways that we can, in this larger way of us in life with a capital L, looking at liberation with a capital L, looking at being human beings, and this capital H, while we're holding the relativity, but also still holding that, and just the challenges in that.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we jump from one to the other, that one is better, but it's all important. And so this poem speaks to that in some really beautiful ways. So again, it's "Call Me by My True Names." It says, "Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply." Just jumped off the page. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond, and I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. Thich Nhat Hanh.
Wow. I think we can end on that. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Babz.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. We are winding down. Happy weekend, everybody. I'll be back on Monday.